Get off me, Emily cried, her voice trembling as Chad slammed her against the cold lockers. His two friends blocked any escape, laughing as he sneered. I'm going to teach you some respect, vet girl. His hand grabbed the hem of her skirt, his intentions sickeningly clear. To him she was just the quiet new girl, a weak and easy target. But as he yanked on her shirt, the thin chain holding her father's dog tag snapped and fell to the floor. In that instant the fear in Emily's eyes vanished, replaced by an ice-cold focus he didn't see. Chad thought he had finally broken her, but he had no idea he was about to learn a lesson in pain from a second-degree Taekwondo black belt. John Parker's old pickup truck, a machine he'd kept running through sheer force of will, rumbled to a stop in front of Northwood High. The engine idled with a familiar, comforting growl. He turned to his daughter in the passenger seat, his face, etched with lines of both laughter and concern, softening as he looked at her. All right, kiddo. Big day. Emily Parker, a petite 16-year-old, adjusted the glasses on her nose, a nervous habit. It's just another school, Dad. This one's different, he said, his voice imbued with a calm and steady hope that felt almost sacred. This is home now. A fresh start. He reached over and gave her shoulder a firm squeeze. It was their language, a gesture that said, I'm here. I'm proud. You've got this. John was a decorated Army veteran, a man who had served 2 tours and seen corners of the world he hoped his daughter would only ever read about. Now all he wanted was a quiet, predictable life for Emily in a small Midwestern town where values like community and respect were supposed to mean something. Emily offered him a small, brave smile and hoisted her heavy backpack. Okay, Dad. See you after school. As she stepped out, the large brick building seemed to loom over her, a giant waiting to swallow her whole. John watched until her slim figure disappeared through the imposing double doors, a familiar ache of protectiveness tightening in his chest. He stayed for a moment longer, a silent prayer on his lips, before putting the truck in gear and driving away. The first week was a study in quiet observation for Emily. The school was, as her dad had promised, small. But small towns bred deep roots and tight circles, and she was a sapling planted in foreign soil. In her classes she was a model student, polite, attentive, and prepared. In her history class, taught by the sharp-minded and kind-eyed Miss Grant, she felt a flicker of comfort. Can anyone tell me the significance of the phrase, the shot heard round the world? Miss Grant had asked, her eyes scanning the room of mostly bored faces. Emily's hand went up tentatively. It symbolizes the start of the American Revolution, but also the beginning of a new idea of self-governance that would inspire other nations, she said, her voice soft but clear. Excellent, Emily. Exactly right, Ms. Grant beamed. From a few rows back, a dismissive mutter cut through the air. Nerd alert. It was Chad Reynolds, the school's unofficial king, who smirked at his friends. Emily felt a hot blush creep up her neck and sank a little lower in her seat. During her lunch breaks, she would find an empty table in the corner of the deafeningly loud cafeteria and lose herself in a book. She didn't mind the solitude, she was used to it. But in a place where social currency was everything, being alone was a weakness to be exploited. The whispers began almost immediately. That's the new girl, someone would say. Her dad's a vet or something. The word vet was spoken in a strange mix of tones. Some said it with reverence, others with a pity she hated, and a few with a kind of sneering suspicion, as if it marked her family as damaged goods. She's a weirdo, a girl with bright pink hair had declared to her giggling friends, loud enough for Emily to easily overhear. Total teacher's pet. Never talks. Emily simply turned a page, her wall of practiced indifference firmly in place. Words were just air. They couldn't hurt you if you didn't give them permission. But Chad Reynolds's attention was a different kind of force. He was tall, athletic, and carried himself with an unearned arrogance that came from a life of privilege. He moved through the halls like he owned them, and he seemed to have a deep-seated contempt for anyone who didn't fit into his narrow worldview. He saw Emily sitting alone with her books and saw an easy target, a puzzle he wanted to break just for the fun of it. One day, a shadow fell across the pages of her novel. She looked up into the smirking faces of Chad and his 2 loyal cronies, Logan and Kyle. What's the matter? Chad drawled, his voice thick with fake sympathy. Book club running late? Don't have any friends to talk to. Emily refused to give him the satisfaction of a response. She simply looked back down at her book, her heart starting a low, anxious drumbeat. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he snapped, his tone hardening. He nudged her book with the toe of his expensive sneaker. "Or are you too good to talk to us normal people?" Emily slowly closed the book, marking her page with a finger. She met his gaze, her own expression carefully blank. "I was just reading," she said softly. Chad let out a short, ugly bark of a laugh. "Reading? Right." He exchanged a look with Logan and Kyle, who chuckled like trained seals. "We'll have to fix that. This isn't a library, weirdo." He swaggered away, leaving a vortex of silence in his wake as other students scurried to avoid the fallout. The gentle start to her new life had curdled into a familiar, deep unease. She was alone, and the biggest shark in this small pond had just found her. The harassment, once limited to whispers, now became Chad's daily sport. He seemed to take a cruel pleasure in trying to find a crack in her calm exterior. In the crowded hallways between classes, he'd position himself to loudly critique her. "Check it out, guys," he announced one morning as Emily passed, wearing a simple pair of jeans and a plain blue sweater. "Looks like the thrift store had a sale. Is that a charity case or what?" A ripple of nervous snickers followed his words. The laughter wasn't genuine. It was a tax paid to the king to ensure his attention didn't turn on them. Emily learned to walk the halls with her eyes fixed on the floor, her shoulders hunched, trying to make herself as small and invisible as possible. All she wanted was to absorb her lessons, get through the day, and retreat to the safety of home. Her history class with Ms. Grant became both a refuge and a battleground. Ms. Grant saw everything. She noticed Chad making a show of repeatedly kicking the leg of Emily's desk. Thump, thump, thump. A dull rhythmic torture. "Mr. Reynolds," Ms. Grant's voice cut through the room sharp and clear. "Is there a problem with your seat? Or are you trying to communicate in Morse code?" Chad stopped, a smug smirk plastered on his face. "No, Ms. Grant. Just stretching a cramp." "Then I suggest you stretch your way to Principal Harris's office if you cannot show basic respect to your classmates," she said, her gaze firm. Chad rolled his eyes but stopped the kicking, though not before shooting Emily a venomous look that promised retaliation. Ms. Grant offered Emily a small, supportive nod, an unspoken alliance. That evening, the weight of the day settled heavily on Emily. At the dinner table, she was uncharacteristically silent, pushing her mashed potatoes into a small mountain on her plate. John, a man trained to read subtleties in landscapes and men, could read his daughter like a book. He didn't push, he simply opened the door. "Tough day at the salt mines?" he asked, his tone light as he passed her the salad bowl. Emily shrugged, keeping her eyes down. "Just new school stuff. It's fine." John studied her face, noticing the faint, telltale tension around her eyes and the set of her jaw. "Remember what we talked about," he said gently. "Indomitable spirit. Keep your head high. You're a Parker. We bend, but we don't break." She looked up and managed a small nod, a little of his quiet strength seeping into her. "I know, Dad." Later that night, long after her homework was finished, Emily descended the wooden stairs to the basement. It was her sanctuary. Her father had converted a section of it into a private dojang for her. A scuffed heavy bag hung from a steel support beam, and interlocking mats covered the cold concrete floor. She changed into her worn dobok, the crisp white uniform of a TAEKWONDO practitioner. With practiced hands she tied the black belt around her waist, a belt distinguished by 2 gold stripes, signifying her rank as a second-degree black belt. She began her pumsi, the memorized patterns of defense and attack. Her movements were a paradox, graceful yet lethal, fluid yet sharp. A side kick snapped out. A knife hand block cut through the air. A turning kick whistled past the heavy bag. Here, in the damp, quiet air of the basement, she wasn't the weird girl or the charity case. She wasn't small or silent or afraid. Here she was a warrior. Her father had enrolled her in classes when she was just 7, telling her, "The world isn't always a kind place, Em. A person has to know how to stand their own ground." As she moved, the simmering injustice of her school day fueled each precise action, transforming her silent frustration into a powerful, focused energy. It's awful how people make comments without knowing a thing about you. Have you ever dealt with comments like that at work or school? Let us know in the comments and tell us where you're watching from today. The bullying was no longer just a war of words. It had become a physical campaign of intimidation. One afternoon, as Emily was navigating a hallway packed with students, Chad deliberately stepped into her path. He didn't just bump her. He slammed his shoulder into hers, a calculated act of aggression that sent her stack of books, a heavy history textbook and a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, crashing to the linoleum floor. Pages fluttered open, exposing her notes to the world. As Emily knelt to retrieve them, her face burning with humiliation, Chad and his friends loomed over her. "Watch where you're going, vet girl," Chad sneered, the insult now a familiar weapon. Logan nudged him, a cruel glint in his eyes. "I bet you can't make her cry," he whispered, his voice carrying easily in the sudden lull of the hallway. Kyle, ever the sycophant, chimed in. "Nah, she's like a robot. No feelings. I bet you can't even make her scream." Emily's hands trembled, but she forced them to be steady as she gathered her scattered belongings. She could feel the dozens of pairs of eyes on her, a mixture of pity and fear. No one spoke up. No one offered to help. Instead, they gave her a wide berth, a silent, shuffling herd terrified of attracting the attention of the predators. Her isolation was now a physical barrier. The few girls who had once offered a shy hello now studied their phones or the opposite wall as she passed, afraid that proximity to her was a contagion. Finally, with her books clutched to her chest like a shield, she stood. She looked past Chad, her face an unreadable mask of calm, and walked away, the sound of their mocking laughter a poison arrow in her back. She was shaken to her core, but she would die before giving them the satisfaction of seeing it. That night, John knew for sure that something was deeply wrong. Emily barely touched her dinner, her usual quietness now a heavy, oppressive silence that filled the small kitchen. "Emily," he said, his voice soft but edged with a command she knew well. "Talk to me. What happened at school today?" "Nothing, Dad. I'm just tired," she lied, unable to meet his gaze. How could she tell him? He had moved them here for a better, safer life. He carried enough burdens from his past. She refused to add hers to the pile. She was convinced she could handle it herself, that she could weather this storm. John saw the lie clear as day. "I've seen men hide shrapnel wounds better than you're hiding this, Emily," he said, his voice laced with frustration and worry. "I'm your father. My job is to have your back. Let me help." "I'm fine, really," she insisted, the words tasting like ash. The conversation ended there, but the tension remained, a silent chasm between them. Meanwhile, across town at a brightly lit burger joint, Chad was holding court with his friends. Emily's refusal to break was grating on his ego. Her quiet dignity felt like a personal insult, a challenge to his dominance. "She thinks she's so tough," Chad grumbled, shoving a handful of fries into his mouth. "Just ignoring me like I'm nothing. We need to do something bigger. Something she can't just walk away from." Logan and Kyle leaned in, their faces alight with a shared malicious glee. "What are you thinking?" Kyle asked, his eyes wide. A nasty predatory smile spread across Chad's face. "Oh, I have an idea," he said, his voice dropping. "Tomorrow, after the last bell, in the old gym hallway, we're going to teach the quiet girl a lesson about respect she'll never forget." The tone had shifted from petty bullying to something far more sinister. A storm was gathering, and Emily was standing directly in its path. The final plan was cemented over greasy pizza during lunch. Chad, Logan, and Kyle huddled together, their whispers low and conspiratorial. The hallway outside the old, seldom used gymnasium was the perfect spot. After the final bell, it was a ghost town. A dead-end corridor most students avoided in favor of the newer, brighter main exit. It was an ideal place for an ambush, a pocket of the school where no one would see, and no one would hear. The last bell of the day shrieked, a piercing signal of freedom. Students erupted from classrooms, their chatter and laughter echoing down the halls. Emily methodically gathered her things from her locker, a sense of relief washing over her. Just a few more minutes and she would be home. She chose her usual route, down the quiet, forgotten hallway toward the side exit. But today the silence felt different. It wasn't peaceful, it was predatory. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to claw at the walls. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from a recessed doorway, blocking her path. It was Chad. Before Emily could even process the danger, his hand shot out and clamped around her arm, his grip surprisingly strong like a vice. "Going somewhere," he sneered. A jolt of pure adrenaline shot through her. Let go of me, Chad. He laughed, a harsh, grating sound, and shoved her backward. Her back hit the cold, unforgiving metal of the lockers with a loud clang. From either end of the hall, Logan and Kyle emerged, sealing off any escape. They were smiling. It was a perfectly executed trap. We just want to talk, Chad said, his face uncomfortably close to hers. His breath was sour, a mix of stale pizza and something bitter. He pressed his body against hers, using his weight to pin her. You think you're so much better than everyone, don't you? Walking around all quiet and judging. No one's here to save you now. Not your weirdo vet daddy. Panic, cold and sharp, began to rise in Emily's throat, threatening to choke her. Get off me, she said, her voice a strained whisper. Chad's smirk widened into a grotesque leer. He was enjoying her fear. His free hand moved from her arm, fumbling at the hem of her skirt. He was trying to pull it up. The sickening intent was brutally clear. This wasn't about taunts anymore. He was going to assault her. Right here in this empty, echoing hallway. Emily began to struggle in earnest, pushing against his chest, but he was bigger and stronger. Please stop, she choked out, tears of terror and rage welling in her eyes. As he yanked viciously on the collar of her shirt, something snapped. It wasn't just her composure. The thin silver chain around her neck, the one holding her father's military-issue dog tag, broke under the strain. The small worn metal plate, a piece of her dad, a promise of safety she kept with her always, fell to the floor with a soft metallic clink. That tiny sound cut through the fog of her panic like a gunshot. Everything went silent in her mind. A memory, crystal clear, flashed before her eyes. Her father, handing her the tag on her 10th birthday. This kept me safe in places you can't imagine, he'd said. Now it'll watch over you. Another memory, this one in the basement dojo. His voice calm and firm. The goal isn't to fight. The goal is to end the fight. You defend your space. You defend your dignity. You stand your ground. The fear evaporated, replaced by a glacial, diamond-hard focus. The terrified girl pinned against the lockers was gone. What happens next is something Chad never saw coming. If you're rooting for Emily, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss stories like this. A new voice filled the dead air of the hallway. It was Emily's, but it was transformed. Gone was the soft, hesitant whisper. This voice was low, steady, and resonated with a cold, unshakable authority that made the hairs on Chad's arms stand on end. I said, let go of me. This is your only warning. Chad was so taken aback by the sudden shift that he actually faltered for a half second. Then his arrogance reasserted itself. He let out a disbelieving laugh. A warning? From you? What are you gonna do, bore me to death with a book? He lunged for her again, his hands reaching, his face contorted in a mask of rage and entitlement. He never made contact. In a breathtakingly fluid motion, Emily's world snapped into a new gear. Her hand shot up, not to weakly push, but to strike. A perfectly executed palm heel strike, delivered with the full force of her body, connected squarely with the underside of Chad's chin. His head snapped back with an audible crack, and his eyes went wide with a mixture of shock and searing pain. As he staggered backward, momentarily stunned, Emily didn't pause. She pivoted on the ball of her foot, her body coiling and uncoiling like a spring. Her leg whipped around in a flawless, lightning-fast roundhouse kick that landed with a sickening thud in his ribs. The air rushed out of Chad's lungs in a pained, desperate whoosh. He crumpled to the ground, clutching his side, his face a mask of agony as he gasped for breath. Logan, seeing his leader fall, let out an incoherent roar of rage and charged at her like a clumsy bull. You little. He never finished the insult. Emily met his telegraphed, sloppy rush with the calm precision of a seasoned matador. She sidestepped his charge, her hand grabbing the sleeve of his outstretched arm. Using his own forward momentum against him, she dropped her hips, pivoted, and flipped him clean over her shoulder. Logan sailed through the air and landed flat on his back with a heavy, bone-jarring thud that echoed in the hallway. He lay there, dazed and groaning, the fight knocked out of him completely. Kyle, who had been standing guard at the far end of the hall, froze solid. His jaw hung open, his face a comical picture of disbelief and terror. He looked from Emily, who had now settled into a low, balanced, ready stance, to his two friends moaning pathetically on the floor. He wanted no part of whatever this was. He took a hesitant step back. It was at that moment that a few students, their curiosity piqued by the strange noises, rounded the corner. They stopped dead in their tracks, their minds struggling to process the scene. Then, almost as one, their smartphones came out, their fingers fumbling to hit record. They captured the impossible tableau: Emily Parker, the quiet, nerdy new girl, standing tall and utterly composed. And Chad Reynolds, the untouchable king of the school, curled up on the floor with a bloody nose, fat tears starting to streak through the grime on his face. "She attacked me," Chad wailed, pointing a shaking, accusatory finger at Emily. "For no reason. I was just talking to her and she went crazy and attacked me." The bystanders kept filming, their lenses capturing Chad's pathetic lies and Emily's powerful, dignified silence. The tables hadn't just turned, they had been smashed to pieces. A wave of catharsis washed over the onlookers. This was justice, raw and immediate, for every person who had ever been made to feel small by a bully. The quiet girl had finally found her voice, and it was a roar. The growing commotion and Chad's loud wails brought the sound of heavy, hurried footsteps. Principal Harris, a balding man whose posture suggested a deep aversion to conflict, appeared at the end of the hall. His gaze swept over the scene, his mind quickly settling on the most convenient narrative. His star athlete, Chad Reynolds, son of a major school donor, was on the floor, and the quiet, problematic new girl was standing over him. "What in the world is going on here?" he demanded, his voice booming with authority. His eyes, however, were fixed on Emily, already convicting her. "She attacked me, Principal Harris," Chad sobbed, milking the moment for all it was worth. "I was just walking by, and she went completely insane. Ask anyone." Mr. Harris's expression hardened into a mask of stern disapproval. He took a step toward Emily. "Young lady, is this true? Did you physically assault another student?" Before Emily could formulate a response, one of the students holding a phone bravely stepped forward. "That's not what happened, sir. At all. We have it on video." The student held out the phone. Mr. Harris reluctantly took it. The short clip was damningly clear. It showed Logan charging at Emily, and her expertly, defensively, flipping him. Another student, a girl who had been in Emily's history class, spoke up. "And we saw Chad grab her first. He had her pinned against the lockers. He wouldn't let her go." Mr. Harris's face cycled through a series of emotions: accusation, confusion, and finally, dawning horror at the potential administrative nightmare unfolding before him. He looked from the phone to a now silent, guilty-looking Chad. Emily finally spoke, her voice devoid of emotion, stating only facts. "He grabbed me. He and his friends cornered me. He would not let go. My father taught me to stand my ground when I am physically threatened." Just then, Ms. Grant arrived, her face etched with concern. She took in the scene in a single, sweeping glance: Emily's rigid posture, Chad's faux tears, the students with their phones, and her expression set in grim understanding. "Principal Harris," she said, her voice cutting through the tension with the authority of her long tenure. "I have had to warn Mr. Reynolds about his relentless harassment of this young woman multiple times in my classroom. I am not in the least surprised it has escalated to this." The ground was shifting beneath the principal's feet. The final seismic shift occurred when the main office, following procedure, called the parents. Chad's mother, Brenda Reynolds, a sharp-featured woman dripping in designer labels, stormed into the school office first, immediately threatening to "call our lawyer" and ruin this school's funding. But then John Parker walked in. He wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. He moved with a quiet, coiled intensity that made Brenda Reynolds' loud threat seem hollow and childish. The controlled rage in his eyes was more intimidating than any shouting match. He walked straight past the principal and Mrs. Reynolds, his focus entirely on his daughter. He placed his hands gently on her shoulders, his gaze scanning her from head to toe, checking for any sign of harm. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice a low rumble only she could hear. "I'm okay, Dad," she whispered, her composure finally starting to crack in the safety of his presence. Only then did John turn his steady, unblinking gaze to Principal Harris. His voice was low, precise, and carried the weight of a man who did not make idle threats. "Your duty of care to my daughter failed today. The only reason she is standing here unharmed is because I taught her how to defend herself from predators. Now you are going to tell me, step by step, what you plan to do about the boys who cornered my child in one of your hallways." Principal Harris, caught between a furious veteran, irrefutable video evidence, and a now cowering bully, finally understood the gravity of his situation. The school's reputation was on the line and he had to choose a side. For the first time all day he made the right choice. The videos did not remain a school secret. By evening, they had escaped the confines of student text chains and exploded onto the local community's social media landscape. Someone, likely a student whose own father was a veteran, uploaded the clearest clip to the town's main Facebook group and a statewide Veterans Association page. The caption was simple and powerful: "Veteran's daughter defends herself against bullies at Northwood High." The story caught fire. The carefully crafted narrative that the Reynolds family tried to push, that their gentle son was the victim of an unprovoked, violent attack by an unstable new student, was immediately and overwhelmingly drowned out by a tidal wave of public support for Emily. The comment sections became a forum for righteous indignation and praise. "That's how you raise a strong, capable daughter. God bless her and her father," wrote a woman named Marianne, who identified herself as a mother of 3. A man named Sergeant Bill Johnson commented, "We stand behind our own. That girl showed the courage and indomitable spirit we honor. Those punks got exactly what they deserved." Hooah! The school's phone lines lit up like a Christmas tree the next morning. Members of the local Veterans of Foreign Wars Post called to formally express their unwavering support for John Parker and his daughter. The PTA president, bombarded with messages from angry parents, called an emergency meeting and demanded a transparent, no-nonsense investigation. The local news affiliate even ran a short segment on the story, quoting the VFW Post commander. The pressure was immense and unrelenting. The Reynolds family, accustomed to solving every problem with checkbooks and veiled threats, discovered that their influence was useless against viral video evidence and the collective moral outrage of a patriotic community. Their blustering about lawsuits faded into an embarrassed, humiliated silence. Principal Harris, seeing the tidal wave of public opinion, acted with a swiftness he had never before displayed. Chad, Logan, and Kyle were suspended indefinitely, with a recommendation for expulsion delivered to the school board. He then announced a mandatory, school-wide assembly on bullying, respect, and personal responsibility. At the assembly, a humbled Mr. Harris spoke to the student body. He talked about the courage it takes to stand up for what is right and the cowardice of preying on the quiet and the vulnerable. He then looked directly at Emily, who was sitting between her father and Miss Grant, and offered a sincere, public apology for the school's failure to protect her. Then he did something unexpected. "Emily Parker," he said, his voice echoing in the silent auditorium. "Would you please stand?" A hesitant quiet fell over the students. Emily, her heart pounding, slowly rose to her feet. She stood there, small and unassuming in the vast auditorium. And then a single person began to clap. It was Miss Grant. A moment later, a football player in the front row joined in, then another student, and another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, a roaring wave of applause and cheers washing over her. It was a sound of admiration, of apology, of respect. As she shakily sat back down, Miss Grant leaned over and gave her a warm, proud hug. The public reversal was absolute. Justice, for once, had been loud, clear, and deeply, profoundly satisfying. Walking into school the following Monday was like entering a different world. The hostile whispers that had once shadowed Emily's every step were gone, replaced by quiet nods of respect and genuine smiles. Students who had once meticulously avoided her gaze now greeted her. "Hey, Emily." "Morning, Parker." A jock who had often been seen laughing along with Chad's taunts cornered her by her locker, his expression sheepish. "Hey, Parker," he mumbled, shuffling his feet. That was really cool what you did. I'm sorry about, all that stuff before." "Thank you," Emily said, accepting the clumsy apology with grace. During lunch, she still chose her corner table, but the space around her no longer felt like a quarantine zone. It felt like a quiet island of her own choosing. A freshman girl, emboldened by the new social order, timidly approached her table. "Is it true?" the girl asked in an odd whisper. "That you're really a black belt?" Emily looked up from her book and offered a small, authentic smile. "Second degree," she confirmed simply. The girl's eyes went wide. "Whoa," she breathed before scurrying back to her friends, whispering excitedly. Emily was no longer a target, she was a legend. When the final bell rang, she walked out the front doors into the bright, welcoming afternoon sun. John's pickup truck was there, a steadfast beacon in its usual spot. He got out as she approached, a look of profound pride on his face that went deeper than words. He didn't say much, he didn't need to. He just pulled her into a tight, strong hug. "Proud of you, kid," he murmured into her hair. "Thanks, Dad," she said, her voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. "For everything. I always worried that what I taught you in the basement would just be a hobby," he admitted as they drove home, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. "I prayed you'd never have to use it. But seeing you stand up for yourself, seeing you use that strength to be your own shield. I've never been prouder." That evening, in the quiet of her room, Emily took the broken silver chain from her dresser drawer. She carefully unhooked her father's dog tag from the snap link. She walked over to the small, simple wooden hanger on her wall where her progression of TAEKWONDO belts was displayed, from white to solid black. At the very top, right next to the worn, dignified black belt she had earned through a decade of sweat and discipline, she carefully hung the small, silver dog tag. It glinted in the lamplight, a quiet, powerful testament to two legacies, now intertwined as one: the legacy of a soldier's service to his country, and the legacy of a daughter's strength, forged in a basement and tested in a hallway. She was no longer just the veteran's daughter. She was a quiet warrior who had fought for and won her own peace. Emily learned that true strength isn't about being loud, it's about standing your ground with dignity. For more stories about underdogs who find their courage, check out our playlist of underdog stories, which you can find in the comments below.